All right. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. If anybody else joins, they'll just have to catch up to speed. I'm Tyler Carter with NewView Trust. I'm our Director of Business Development for our Institutional Solutions Division. I've been here for about 6 years and want to spend the next 30 minutes or so with you talking about some of the misconceptions when it comes to retirement plans. We'll go through things one by one. I'll try and provide as much background as possible. Of course, in 30 minutes, we'll have to stay at sort of a 30,000 level foot area. But at the end of this presentation, we do have some additional resources. And of course, we're always happy to speak with you one-on-one about your particular set of circumstances and how we might be able to be of service to you. So without further ado, we will go ahead and kick it off. And before we get into the meat of the presentation, as always, there's a disclosure. I want to inform everybody that we're not attorneys, CPAs, or financial advisors. We aren't here to give any investment advice or guidance. We're solely third-party independent custodians for your alternative investments. We'll never give a recommendation or advise you whether or not to invest in a particular deal. It's our responsibility essentially only to determine the administrative feasibility of being a custodian for your chosen alternative investments. So let me talk a little bit about kind of who NewView is and what it is that we do before we get into the 6 fallacies of retirement accounts. We exist for the sole purpose of giving our clients the broadest possible scope of investment options. While many people choose to invest through a big wirehouse into things like mutual funds, stocks, bonds, CDs, and ETFs, we provide our clients with the full scope of investments as allowed by the IRS. We've been doing this, and it's been our exclusive line of business since 2003. So we have 16 years in the business here. Looks like we had a question in the chat. Okay, I will get to that shortly. So there's 45 of us, almost 50 now in the office, with the sole purpose of ensuring that your alternative investments happen seamlessly and flawlessly. We have just over $1.3 billion in client assets, and it's our mission to ensure that we're simple, available, and responsive. We're relationship driven, and we want to make sure that we're here as a resource for you as you go down the path to self-direction. And there was a question, do we get a recording of this presentation today? Yes, I do believe that there's going to be a recording that's going to be sent out at the end of the presentation. So if you're not able to stick around, we'll certainly deliver this content to you at a later time. Jumping right in, 6 fallacies about retirement plans. In my 6 years of tenure here, I receive a lot of questions. Many of them are the same regarding what's feasible, what's not inside of a retirement account, what makes a self-directed IRA different from a regular IRA, and we're going to get into every bit of those components. So the #1 misconception when it comes to retirement accounts is the fact that you're not required to invest into stocks, bonds, and mutual funds to be compliant with the IRS. That's false. In fact, self-direction has been feasible as long as IRAs have been around. I also want to emphasize that when I use the term self-directed IRA, that's simply industry nomenclature. An IRA is an IRA as defined by the IRS, but that's sort of our internal jargon that we use to indicate that this is the type of retirement account that has the broadest possible scope of investment options. The vast majority of the time, someone has a self-directed IRA, they're opening it up because they want more choices and more control in their retirement account. They feel that they can leverage their own expertise to make prudent investment decisions to invest into things outside the realm of the stock market. We'll get into some of those specific assets a little bit later on in the presentation, but I do want to touch on the fact that obviously you are not bound by publicly traded securities. Some people choose to self-direct their entire retirement portfolio into alternative investments, while others feel that they want to supplement their traditional investments that they might have at a major wirehouse like a Fidelity or a Schwab with some alternatives held here at NewView. Bear with me here. Excellent. So Along with that, I want to touch on some of the specific asset classes that are popular with self-directed IRAs, whether it's real estate, private stock, partnerships. You see the items listed here on the screen. The only things that aren't expressly, or rather are expressly prohibited inside self-directed IRAs are life insurance and collectibles. So precious metals, whether it's gold or silver, mortgage notes, both secured and unsecured, real estate of all types. It could be international real estate. It could be a single family rental. It could be raw land. It really spans the spectrum. Private stock, we see a lot of private bank stock. That's a popular investment inside self-directed IRAs as well. So this is a big one. Most people wonder, how is it that I'm able to have an IRA at NewView? I thought that I had to have my IRA with a bank or a brokerage house. And I think that fallacy stems from the fact that most people understand that they are required to have a custodian. However, it doesn't have to be a bank or a brokerage account. Again, you're coming to a custodian who essentially doesn't have an investment menu. The analogy that I use oftentimes when people say, why can't I buy a physical piece of real estate? Why can't I be a private lender at Fidelity? I mean, it's the same reason that you can't buy lobster at McDonald's. It's just simply something that's not on their menu. Most of the wirehouses and brokerage houses are in business to collect either a commission, an expense ratio on their funds, a management fee, or something like that. NewView differs. We charge a flat fee based on transactions. We don't charge based on the assets under management. It's our, or rather assets under custody. It's our belief that we shouldn't charge someone more who's investing, $100,000 into a deal than $10,000 when it's the same amount of work for us. Really, it's just the amount of zeros in the transaction. I will touch here on this slide. It mentions about checkbook control IRAs. I will touch on this in greater detail, but a checkbook control IRA is essentially someone who has created a single member entity. Usually it's a solo member LLC where their IRA is the only member, so that they have the ultimate amount of flexibility and discretion when making investments through a self-directed IRA. This single member entity allows them to essentially stroke checks or send a wire for whatever investment they'd like, instead of having to rely on NewView's back office processing team to facilitate these investments. While it may be appropriate for some, it's certainly not appropriate for everyone. I think the vast majority of people are served well inside of a regular self-directed IRA, but if you have some sort of extenuating circumstances that would make that a compelling option, NewView can facilitate that for you as well. So one of the largest misconceptions, and probably the biggest asset class that we have here at NewView, is real estate. We have people who may have been a realtor, a real estate investor, and they've learned that they can leverage their knowledge base to make the same sort of investments inside their IRA on a tax-deferred or tax-free basis. So obviously it's false. You can own real estate inside of your IRA. However, there are some rules that should be followed. You can't buy or sell real estate from a prohibited party or a disqualified individual. Those individuals would be yourself, direct lineal ascendants, descendants, basically the trunk of the family tree. And then, of course, you want to make sure that you're not partnering with anyone who's disqualified if there's ever going to be a proportionate change in ownership of the asset that's held between you and another disqualified party. So, for example, if I wanted to buy a piece of real estate with my IRA from my father, that would be prohibited because he's a disqualified party. But if we decided that we wanted to partner our IRAs on the same deal together and ensure that everything is paid with respect to our proportionate ownership, if we own it 50-50, bills are split with respect to that proportion, and additionally any income is split with the same respective ownership. No one is allowed to get any personal benefit out of any real estate they own inside of an IRA. So unfortunately for all of us, I wouldn't be able to buy a vacation home somewhere, rent it out part of the time, and then have personal use of it. That being said, we do have clients who buy real estate for its current investment value, whether it's a rental property or a property that's going to be rehabbed and then rented out. that they decide later on in retirement, once they've attained the age of 59 and a half, they decide that they want to distribute that asset out of the IRA to themselves for personal use. In that case, that would be permitted. And in that example, they've purchased a piece of investment real estate that's provided them with perhaps some appreciation, most likely some income, and then they're able to distribute it out of their IRA to themselves. If it's a traditional IRA, they'll incur income taxes based on the value of the property during the time it was distributed. If they owned it inside of a Roth IRA, they would have the advantage of being able to distribute it out to themselves without any tax consequences whatsoever. So as we touched on, whether it's rehabbing rentals, undeveloped land, any of those investments are feasible. We see people that partner on deals, they syndicate real estate investments. The sky's the limit. It is important to factor in something called UBIT or UBTI, depending on where you hear it, unrelated business taxable income. That incurs when you're operating sort of a business inside of your IRA. It's something that you want to make sure that you have a valuable resource. Going back to that disclosure, we always want to ensure that anyone who's making a self-directed investment, particularly if it's something that's not right down the middle of the plate, that you have the advice and guidance of an attorney or a CPA. However, many people do decide to develop a piece of raw land into something, but in doing so, they may incur that tax. That's something that is important to be looked into up front, and you want to factor that into your overall investment decision. So I think we might have skipped one here. One of the fallacies has to do with buying real estate abroad or taking your IRA abroad. It's something with that we see an increase in popularity. People have this understanding that they can move their IRA offshore. In some ways, yes, that is feasible. Your self-directed custodian must be domiciled here in the United States. However, we do have a multitude of clients who may invest into an entity offshore. They may buy real estate abroad. I think we've had people that have purchased parking spaces in Italy, teak plantations in Central America, and vacation homes or rental properties all over the place. Not vacation properties for them currently, but vacation rentals. So yes, it's feasible. We do need to ensure that all purchase documents are in English, and it's always wise to run everything by us before anyone pulls a trigger on things. The most important piece of, I can't say advice, but suggestion that I would give to those in attendance, make sure that you contact NewView and run by your hypothetical investment to us. It's very likely that we can answer a lot of questions, put you at ease, and ensure that the transaction process goes more seamlessly when we know in advance what it is that ultimately you're trying to accomplish. So this is one that's sort of near and dear to my heart. I deal with this question all the time. We'll deal with a client that's interested in making some sort of alternative investment. They speak with their advisor and are told that, hey, making investments outside the stock market is inherently risky. Certainly there are alternative investments that carry risk. Almost all investments carry risk, but to suggest wholeheartedly and across the board that an alternative investment is less risky than a publicly traded investment, I think that is a fallacy. We're kind of comparing apples to oranges. That's like saying all cars are faster than trucks. It's simply not the case. We have to look at the specific make and model to make that comparison. There's plenty of publicly traded securities that carry a substantial amount of risk. In fact, there's no shortage of people who decide to self-direct their retirement account because they feel that they're avoiding a lot of market risk. Someone might say, for example, that if they're lending money where there's a substantial amount of collateral, they feel more comfortable with that they're not exposed to all of the market risk, the geopolitical interest risk, or whatever other interest or whatever other risks they're exposed to in the market. Obviously, I don't want to be cynical, but certainly I think much like every time I go to pinch a penny, it's no surprise that I'm told I need chemicals for my pool. If you're dealing with a financial advisor, they are incentivized to keep assets with you and are going to suggest that you don't take your money out of the accounts that you have with them. So feel free to lean on us. If your advisor has any questions, we're happy to do a conference call with them to explain that there's not inherently more risk. Many of the same protections, errors and omissions insurance, fidelity bonds, and so forth that you'd find with most major financial institutions apply here at NewView as well. And this is a fallacy that's easy for me to dispel. I think that there are a fair number of people who feel that setting up a self-directed IRA is going to be convoluted, it's going to be complicated, it's going to be cost prohibitive, and nothing can be further from the truth. In fact, the vast majority of the time, it's less expensive to make alternative investments than it is to invest into your average actively managed mutual fund. We charge $50 in most cases to open the account, $95 to buy or sell an asset, and generally speaking, it's $295 per asset on an ongoing basis. Typically, the average mutual fund expense ratio for an actively managed fund is about 1.25% the last I looked. So it's much more economical, or at least not cost prohibitive, to invest inside of a self-directed IRA. The process as well is relatively straightforward and streamlined. It takes you 5 to 10, maybe 15 minutes at the most to fill out the application online. You can also fill out a PDF by hand and submit that back to us via email or fax. That'll also suffice. And then I'll touch a little bit about actually making the investment inside of an IRA. If you're buying a piece of real estate, if you're lending money, if you're purchasing private bank stock, there's always going to be documentation that would apply inherently, regardless of whether or not you were using a self-directed IRA to facilitate that investment. In the example of a physical piece of real estate, there's always going to be a real estate contract. So nothing changes. There's still a real estate contract when investing through a self-directed IRA. The major difference, of course, is that instead of titling that contract in your own name, it's going to be titled in the name of your IRA. If it were my case, it would be, NewView Trust Co. Custodian FBO Tyler Carter IRA. And most likely I would list the account number after that, or Roth IRA and the account number after that. In addition to that inherent paperwork that applies regardless of whether you're using an IRA, we have a corresponding purchase authorization form for just about any asset class under the sun. So if it's a physical piece of real estate, we do have our real estate purchase authorization form. It's a 1.5-page document. I encourage anyone who's buying real estate, bank stock, issuing a loan, buying a mortgage, anything of the sort, give us a call. We can walk you through that piece of paperwork. It's relatively straightforward, but ultimately, it's generally those two documents in tandem that will allow you to complete your investment with NewView. The paperwork that it would apply regardless of whether or not you're using an IRA, and then our corresponding purchase authorization form. Once we have the account open, cash and get order, and all that paperwork filled out, the transaction time is about 48 hours for us to get that funded. Oftentimes, if we know what's coming to us in advance, it can occur same day. So I'll talk a little bit more, I think we have some time remaining, about several of the other misconceptions when it comes to self-directed IRAs. Many people feel that, hey, look, I'm contributing to my 401k at work, so I'm ineligible to contribute to an IRA. That's not always the case, especially when you're not maxing out your 401k at work. I encourage everyone to give us a shout so that we can talk about where a self-directed IRA might fit into your overall retirement strategy. The second bulleted point up here is that self-directed IRA earnings have an annual limit. Nothing could be further from the truth. You have a limit on what you're able to contribute to an IRA or a self-directed IRA, but there's no cap on what your investment can grow to. Additionally, if you have money that's already in a retirement savings plan, a 401k, an IRA elsewhere, a 403b, those types of accounts can often be moved into a self-directed IRA, and that doesn't count for your contribution limit. We also hear occasionally, although albeit less often, that disqualified persons cannot be beneficiaries of an IRA. Obviously, a disqualified person cannot benefit from an IRA investment. For example, a father could not own a rental property inside of his IRA and rent it to his son or daughter. However, nothing prohibits disqualified persons being listed as beneficiaries, meaning that when the account owner passes away, that IRA is inherited by whomever they designate. There's not any sort of restriction or limitation in that regard. The last one here is that you cannot have a self-directed IRA without opening an LLC. I know that there are other companies that really advocate and charge candidly an exorbitant amount of money to open up a self-directed IRA and corresponding LLC for the purposes of checkbook control. It's absolutely not required. And if I'm making an investment into something that doesn't have a lot of moving parts, I'm buying a rental property that's relatively turnkey or something like that, I wouldn't go to the extra trouble and have the record-keeping responsibility incumbent upon me of creating an LLC. It's an option, but it's certainly not a requirement, although we do deal with a fair number of people who are under the impression that they need to open up an LLC. For the vast majority of people, they're probably better off just investing directly through the IRA. So I want to make sure that if anyone has any questions, feel free to type those in to the Q&A forum here. I'll address those shortly. I want to make sure that everyone understands this is a relatively topical and introductory webinar about self-directed IRAs, and I hope it dispels some of the rumors that you may have believed prior to hearing this presentation. For additional information and more resources, I do encourage everyone to text that IRA guide and your first and last names to 484848. We'll send our free self-directed IRA e-guide. It'll likely have something in writing so that you can refer, well, not likely, it definitively will have everything in writing. You can refer back to it to answer any additional questions you have. And of course, our contact information is listed here as well. Visit our website, give us a call. We're happy to speak with you. We really are passionate about what we do. It's exciting what we do to see all the interesting investments that people make inside their retirement plans. Hopefully we can help you as well. I'll give it a second. If anyone has any questions, go ahead and enter those in now. Otherwise, we look forward to speaking with you, serving with you, and thanks for spending a bit of time with us today. Thank you.